The fluorescent lights buzzed softly in the private hospital corridor. Outside room 247, Sergeant James Whitmore stood perfectly still, his polished boots planted firmly on the cream-colored tiles. His hand rested on his belt. His jaw was set, and his orders were clear. No one enters without the princess's explicit permission. It was 2:17 in the morning. Kate had been rushed to the hospital 6 hours earlier with severe complications. The details were being kept quiet. The press didn't know. Most of the palace staff didn't know, but James knew his duty. He had served in the Royal Protection Command for 11 years. He had guarded diplomats, protected visiting heads of state, and stood watch during moments of crisis. But tonight felt different. The hospital wing was silent except for the distant hum of medical equipment. James could hear his own breathing. Kate's doctor had left 30 minutes ago with strict instructions. Rest. Privacy. No visitors until morning. Then he heard the footsteps. They echoed from the far end of the corridor, confident, quick, purposeful. James straightened slightly, his eyes fixed on the corner where the hallway turned. A moment later, 3 figures appeared. Queen Camilla walked at the center, flanked by 2 of her personal aides. She wore a dark coat over her nightclothes. Her expression was calm but determined, the kind of look that expected compliance. Behind them, 2 more palace security officers followed at a respectful distance. James felt his pulse quicken. He had trained for confrontations with intruders, protesters, threats, but this was something else entirely. Camilla's eyes locked onto his as she approached. "She didn't slow down, Sergeant," she said coolly, stopping 3 feet from the door. "I'm here to see the Princess of Wales." James stood his ground. His voice was steady, respectful, but firm. "Your Majesty, the Princess is resting under doctor's orders. No visitors are permitted at this time." One of the aides stepped forward, a thin woman with sharp features. "The Queen Consort doesn't require permission to visit family members. Step aside." James didn't move. His eyes remained on Camilla. "My orders come directly from the princess's medical team and her private secretary. No exceptions." The air in the corridor seemed to tighten. Camilla's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or irritation. "Sergeant Whitmore," she said slowly, her tone measured, "I understand you have your orders, but I am the Queen Consort, and I am concerned about Catherine's well-being. Surely you can make an exception." Behind her, one of the palace security officers shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew what was being asked. Everyone understood the unspoken pressure. But James had spent his entire career preparing for moments like this. Moments when duty and convenience collided. When the easy choice and the right choice weren't the same thing, he took a slow breath. "I cannot, Your Majesty. Not without the princess's direct authorization." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Camilla's aide spoke again, her voice sharp now. "This is absurd. You're refusing a direct request from the Queen Consort. Do you understand the consequences of—" "I understand my duty," James interrupted quietly. His eyes never left Camilla's. "And my duty is to protect the princess's privacy and follow her wishes. She asked not to be disturbed tonight." Camilla studied him for a long moment. The fluorescent lights cast shadows across her face. Somewhere down the hall, a door opened and closed. A nurse's soft footsteps faded into the distance. Then Camilla smiled. It wasn't warm. It wasn't friendly. It was the smile of someone who had just accepted a challenge. "I see," she said softly. "Well then, Sergeant, I suppose we'll have to resolve this. Officially." She turned to one of the palace officers. "Contact the palace immediately. I want someone from the royal household on the phone within 5 minutes." James felt his stomach tighten, but his face remained calm because he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't moving from that door. If you're hooked on this story and want to see what happens next, make sure you're subscribed. This situation is about to get a lot more complicated. The palace officer pulled out his phone. Camilla folded her arms and waited, her eyes fixed on the door to room 247. And James Whitmore stood perfectly still, ready for whatever came next. The palace officer's voice was low and tense as he spoke into his phone. James could hear fragments of the conversation. Yes, at the hospital. The Queen Consort, refusing entry. Yes, I understand. But Camilla waited with the patience of someone who had spent decades navigating palace politics. Her aides stood beside her, occasionally glancing at James with barely concealed contempt. The message was clear. He was making a mistake. He was embarrassing himself. He should know better. But James had learned long ago that doing the right thing often meant standing alone. 3 minutes passed. The palace officer ended his call and approached Camilla, speaking quietly into her ear. She listened, nodded once, then turned her attention back to James. "The Lord Chamberlain's office is sending someone," she said. "They'll be here within the hour to clarify the protocol. Until then, I'll wait." She gestured to a row of chairs against the corridor wall. One of her aides immediately moved to position them. Camilla sat down gracefully, crossing her legs and settling in as if she were attending a garden party. James remained standing. His legs were beginning to ache, but he didn't shift his weight. Didn't lean against the wall. Didn't show any sign of discomfort. The minutes crawled by at 2:34. A nurse appeared at the end of the corridor, pushing a medication cart. She froze when she saw the scene. The Queen Consort sitting in the hallway, the royal guard blocking a door, the tension thick enough to taste. She quickly turned and disappeared back. The way she'd come, Camilla's aide checked her watch. One of the palace security officers muttered something into his radio. The fluorescent lights continued their soft, relentless buzzing. James's mind was racing even though his body remained still. He knew what was happening. Calls were being made. Decisions were being weighed. Someone was trying to figure out how to resolve this without creating a scandal. The last thing the palace needed was news of a confrontation between the Queen Consort and a royal guard outside Kate's hospital room. But James also knew something else. Kate had been explicit when she gave her instructions through her private secretary earlier that evening. No visitors. No exceptions. Not until she said otherwise. She had her reasons. And James trusted them. At 2:47, footsteps echoed again from the main corridor. Different this time. Heavier. More official. A man in a dark suit appeared, walking briskly. James recognized him immediately. Sir Richard Pemberton, Deputy Private Secretary to the King. His presence meant this situation had escalated all the way to the top, sir. Richard looked exhausted. His tie was loosened, his hair slightly disheveled. He had clearly been woken up and summoned urgently. He approached Camilla first, bowing slightly. "Your Majesty." "I came as quickly as I could, Richard," Camilla said, standing. "Thank goodness. This situation has become ridiculous. I simply want to check on Catherine, and this sergeant refuses to allow me entry." Sir Richard turned to James. His expression was unreadable. "Sergeant Whitmore, can you explain the situation?" James kept his voice steady. "Sir Richard, I have strict orders from the Princess of Wales's medical team and her private secretary. No visitors until further notice. I am following those orders." The Queen Consort is not simply a visitor. One of Camilla's aides interjected sharply. Sir Richard raised a hand, silencing her. He looked tired. Deeply, bone-achingly tired. This was not a problem he wanted to solve at 3 in the morning, Sergeant, he said carefully. "I understand your dedication to duty. But surely, we can find a reasonable compromise here. Perhaps Her Majesty could simply look in on the princess. A brief moment to ensure she's well?" James felt the pressure mounting. This was it. The moment where he would either bend or break, where doing his job might cost him his career. He thought about Kate, about why she had asked for privacy, about the trust she had placed in the people assigned to protect her. "Sir Richard," he said quietly, "the princess was very clear. She does not wish to be disturbed. If you need confirmation, I suggest contacting her private secretary directly." Sir Richard's jaw tightened. He pulled out his phone and stepped away, making a call. The conversation was brief and hushed. When he returned, his expression had changed. There was something in his eyes now. Respect, perhaps, or resignation. "The princess's private secretary confirms Sergeant Whitmore's orders," he said, looking at Camilla. "I'm afraid we need to respect Catherine's wishes on this matter." Camilla's face remained composed, but her eyes flashed. "I see. So I'm to be turned away from seeing a family member who may be seriously ill. Is that what you're telling me, Richard?" "Your Majesty, sir," Richard said carefully, "the princess has specifically requested privacy during her recovery. It's not a reflection on you personally. It's simply her wish to rest without visitors until morning. And if I insist?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Sir Richard took a slow breath. "Then I would have to advise that forcing entry against the princess's express wishes would create a situation none of us want. For anyone involved?" The threat was subtle, but clear. This could become a scandal, story. A rift that couldn't be hidden. Camilla stood perfectly still for a long moment. Her eyes moved from Sir Richard to James and back again. Then she smiled that same cold smile from before. "Very well," she said softly. "I will respect Catherine's wishes. For now." She turned and began walking back down the corridor, her aides and security officers falling into step behind her. Sir Richard watched her go, then turned to James. His expression was complicated, grateful and troubled at the same time. "You did the right thing, Sergeant," he said quietly, "but you've also just made a very powerful enemy." Then he, too, disappeared down the corridor. James was alone again. The silence returned. The fluorescent lights buzzed, and behind the door to room 247, Kate finally slept peacefully. But James knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Morning came slowly. The sky outside the hospital windows shifted from black to deep blue to pale gray. James had been standing for 7 hours straight. His back ached. His feet throbbed. But he remained at his post. At 6:15, Kate's doctor arrived for morning rounds. She was a composed woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an air of absolute authority. She nodded to James as she approached. "Any disturbances, Sergeant?" "One, doctor. Around 2:30, it was handled." She studied his face for a moment, reading the exhaustion and tension there. "The Queen Consort." James didn't answer directly. He didn't need to. The doctor sighed and shook her head. "Well, the princess will be glad you held the line. She specifically told me last night that she needed space. No palace drama. No visitors. Just rest." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you for respecting that." She disappeared into the room. James heard the soft murmur of voices. Kate's voice, weak but alert. The doctor's gentle responses. 15 minutes later, the doctor emerged. "The princess would like to speak with you." James felt a flutter of uncertainty. He stepped inside, closing the door gently behind him. Kate was sitting up slightly in the hospital bed. She looked pale and tired, but her eyes were clear. And the fourth line ran into her arm. Monitors beeped softly beside her. "Sergeant Whitmore," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I heard there was an incident last night." James stood at attention. "Yes, Your Highness. The Queen Consort requested entry to your room. I followed your orders and denied access." Kate was silent for a moment. Then she smiled. It was small and sad, but genuine. "Thank you," she said simply. "I know that wasn't easy. I know it may cause problems for you. My job is to protect you, Your Highness. That includes protecting your privacy and your wishes." Kate nodded slowly. "Camilla means well, I think. But sometimes—" She trailed off, looking out the window. "Sometimes people don't understand that being kind means respecting boundaries, even in a crisis." She turned back to James. "I had a difficult night. Frightening, actually. And I needed space to process it without having to perform. Without having to be gracious, or composed, or royal. I just needed to be a person. Does that make sense?" "Completely, Your Highness." "I knew she would come," Kate continued softly. I knew Camilla would hear I was here and would want to check on me. But I also knew that if she came, it would turn into something else. Questions, concerns, advice, maybe even press management. And her voice cracked slightly. I just couldn't handle that last night. James felt a surge of protective anger toward anyone who would try to intrude on this woman's moment of vulnerability. You don't need to explain, Your Highness. Kate met his eyes. But I do. Because you stood in front of that door and probably put your career at risk for me. The least I owe you is honesty. She took a slow breath. The truth is, relationships in this family are complicated. There's history. There's tension. And sometimes the kindest thing someone can do is give you space, even when they want to help. Especially when they want to help. James understood. He had worked in royal protection long enough to know that palace dynamics were like an iceberg. What the public saw was only a fraction of the reality beneath. What happens now? Kate asked. Will there be consequences for you? Possibly, Your Highness. But I acted according to protocol and your direct orders. That should protect me, Kate repeated, catching the uncertainty in his voice. She was quiet for a moment, then reached for the phone beside her bed. Get me Sir Clive Alderton, please. Clive Alderton was the king's private secretary, the most powerful administrative figure in the royal household. The call was brief. Kate explained the situation calmly and clearly. She emphasized that James had acted precisely as instructed, that he had protected her medical privacy, as was her right, that any consequences for him would be unjust. When she hung up, she looked at James again. Sir Clive will speak with the king this morning. You should be protected. Thank you, Your Highness. No, Kate said firmly. Thank you. In a world where everyone wants something from me, where every interaction is calculated and political, you just did your job with integrity. That's rarer than you might think. James felt his throat tighten. He had spent years as an invisible presence, a professional shadow. Hearing genuine gratitude from someone he had sworn to protect meant more than he could express. Is there anything else you need, Your Highness? Kate smiled again. Actually, yes. Tell the nursing staff they can send breakfast. And inform my private secretary that I'll be ready for visitors this afternoon. Controlled visits. Family only. On my terms, of course. As James turned to leave, Kate spoke again. Sergeant Whitmore, when you see Camilla again, and you will, don't apologize. Don't explain. Just be professional. She'll respect that more than groveling. Trust me. James nodded and left the room, returning to his post outside. The morning continued. Nurses came and went. Breakfast arrived. The hospital slowly came to life with the sounds of a new day beginning at 9:30. James was relieved by another officer. He was finally free to leave, to go home to sleep. But as he walked down the corridor toward the exit, he felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and pride. He had done his job, the right way, the hard way, and he had learned something important about the woman he was sworn to protect. Kate wasn't just a princess. She was a person who understood that true care sometimes meant respecting someone's right to be left alone. But James also knew that palace politics never really ended. Camila had been turned away. Embarrassed, perhaps? And people with power had long memories. As he pushed through the hospital's main doors into the cool morning air, he wondered what price he would ultimately pay for doing the right thing. He wouldn't have to wonder long, 2 days later. James returned to duty 48 hours later. He had slept, recovered, and reported back to the Royal Protection Command headquarters as scheduled. When he arrived, the atmosphere felt different. Colleagues who normally greeted him with casual nods now avoided eye contact. His supervisor's assistant asked him to wait in a small conference room. Instead of going directly to briefing, something was wrong. 20 minutes later, Commander Patricia Ashford entered the room. She was James's direct superior, a known-sense woman who had risen through the ranks on pure competence. Her expression was carefully neutral. Sergeant Whitmore, she said, sitting across from him. We need to talk about the hospital incident. James kept his posture straight. Yes, ma'am. You refused entry to the Queen Consort, she said flatly. That's caused some difficulty. I followed the direct orders given to me by the Princess of Wales's medical team and private secretary, ma'am. The princess herself confirmed those orders were correct. Commander Ashford nodded slowly. I know, and officially, you did everything right. Sir Clive Alderton himself sent a memo confirming that. You're not being disciplined. James felt a small measure of relief, but the commander's expression told him there was more. However, she continued, there are political realities we have to acknowledge. The Queen Consort's office has formally requested that you be reassigned. Not as punishment. They're framing it as a matter of preventing future awkwardness and maintaining professional relationships. James's stomach dropped. Reassigned from royal protection entirely? No, just from any duties involving the Princess of Wales, or events where both the princess and the Queen Consort would be present. They're suggesting you be moved to diplomatic protection or perhaps assigned to one of the minor royals. It was a demotion disguised as a lateral move. Everyone would know what it really meant. James had been exiled for doing his job correctly. When, he asked quietly, 2 weeks. That gives us time to transition your responsibilities and brief your replacement. James sat in silence for a moment, processing. He had known there might be consequences, but understanding that intellectually and feeling it hit you were different things. For what it's worth, Commander Ashford said, her voice softer now, I think you did the right thing. Following orders and protecting someone's privacy isn't grounds for removal. But palace politics don't always align with what's right or fair. Does the princess know? Her office has been informed. I don't know if she's been told personally yet. James nodded. He felt numb. Thank you for being direct, ma'am. As he left the building, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Sergeant Whitmore, this is Rebecca Fielding from the Princess of Wales's private office. The princess would like to speak with you tomorrow at 2 p.m. if you're available. Location to be confirmed. Please respond to confirm. James stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed his response. Confirmed. The next afternoon, James found himself in a private meeting room at Kensington Palace. It was elegant but understated. Comfortable chairs. Warm lighting. A far cry from the sterile hospital corridor where this had all begun, Kate entered alone, closing the door behind her. She looked healthier than she had 2 days ago, though still visibly tired. Thank you for coming, she said, gesturing for him to sit. I heard about the reassignment. I'm furious about it. James was surprised by her directness. Your Highness, I appreciate your concern, but no, Kate interrupted gently but firmly. Don't do that. Don't minimize this. You protected me. You followed my orders. And now you're being punished for it. That's not acceptable. Palace politics are complicated, James said carefully. I understand that. Kate sat down across from him. They are. But here's what I've learned in my years in this family. If you don't push back when something is wrong, it becomes precedent. And I will not set a precedent that people who protect me properly get punished for it. I've spoken with William. We've spoken with his father, and we've made our position clear. The reassignment is unacceptable. You will remain in your current role. James felt a surge of hope. The king agreed. The king, Kate said carefully, understands that this is a matter of protocol and trust. If royal protection officers can be removed for following legitimate orders, it undermines the entire system. Camilla's office has been informed that their request will not be honored. That will create tension, James said. Kate agreed. It will, but some tensions are worth creating. This is one of them. She stood and walked to the window, looking out over the palace gardens. Do you know why I asked for no visitors that night? James shook his head. A serious one. The doctors thought I might need emergency surgery. It turned out to be a false alarm, but for several hours, I didn't know if I was going to be okay. And in that moment, all I wanted was silence. Space. Time to be scared without having to manage anyone else's emotions about it. She turned back to him. Camilla would have meant well. She would have been concerned and caring. But she also would have turned it into a production. There would have been calls made, arrangements adjusted, press strategies discussed, and I just needed to be a frightened person in a hospital bed for a few hours. James understood completely now. You needed someone to protect that space for you. Exactly. And you did. Without question, without compromise, even when it cost you. She moved back to her chair and sat down. That kind of integrity is exactly what I need in the people around me. What William needs. What our children need. She looked at him intently. So I want you to know something. Your career is not over. Your reputation is not damaged. And if anyone in this palace suggests otherwise, they will answer to me personally. James felt his throat tighten. Thank you, Your Highness. There's something else, Kate said. I'm expanding my personal protection team. I want someone whose primary loyalty is to me and my wishes, not to palace politics or hierarchy. I want someone who will stand at a door and refuse entry to anyone, regardless of rank, if that's what I need. Are you interested? James's mind raced. This was a promotion. A significant one. Personal protection for the Princess of Wales was one of the most prestigious assignments in royal security. It would be my honor, Your Highness. Kate smiled. Good. The paperwork will be processed this week. You'll report directly to my private secretary for assignment details. And James? The next time someone tries to push past my boundaries, I'll know you're there to hold the line. As James left Kensington Palace that afternoon, he felt like he was walking on air. He had stood his ground, paid a price, and been rewarded for his integrity. But he also knew that palace dynamics were never simple. Camilla had been overruled, embarrassed twice now, and while Kate had won this battle, the war for power and influence in the royal family was ongoing. James had chosen his side. He had made his loyalty clear, and in the complex, often ruthless world of royal politics, that made him both an asset and a target. The question was, what would happen next? 3 weeks passed. James settled into his new role as part of Kate's personal protection detail. The work was demanding but rewarding. He accompanied her to official engagements, school runs with the children, and private appointments. He learned her rhythms, her preferences, the subtle signals she used to communicate discomfort or the need for space. He also learned quickly that not everyone was pleased with his promotion. During a charity gala at the Royal Albert Hall, James stood near the entrance to the VIP area, monitoring the crowd. Kate was inside, speaking with donors and patrons. William was beside her, charming and attentive. Then James saw Camilla enter through the main lobby, flanked by her own security detail. She moved through the crowd gracefully, greeting people with practiced warmth. But when her eyes found James, something flickered across her face. Recognition, and something harder to define. She approached him directly, her security team hanging back slightly. James straightened, professional and respectful. Sergeant Whitmore, she said coolly. Still on duty, I see? Yes, Your Majesty. I heard about your new assignment. Congratulations. Quite a promotion for someone so recently reassigned. Her tone was pleasant. Her words were courteous. But the message underneath was clear. She knew exactly what had happened. She knew he had been protected, and she was letting him know she hadn't forgotten. Thank you, Your Majesty, James said neutrally. Camilla studied him for a moment. Tell me, Sergeant, do you believe you made the right choice that night at the hospital? It was a trap. Any answer would be problematic. If he said yes, it implied she had been wrong to come. If he said no, it suggested he was weak or regretful. James chose honesty. I believe I followed my orders and protected the princess's wishes, Your Majesty. That's my job. Your job, Camilla repeated softly. Yes, quite. She smiled then, the same cold smile from the hospital corridor. Loyalty is important, Sergeant, but it's also important to remember that loyalty can be complicated. In this family, sometimes being loyal to one person means being disloyal to others. That's a difficult position to be in. I'm loyal to my duty, Your Majesty, and to protecting those I'm assigned to protect. How diplomatic, Camilla said. But remember this. The Princess of Wales is young. She's popular. She's beloved. But she's also still learning how this family works, how power truly operates here. Sometimes the people who seem to be helping her are actually isolating her. Have you considered that? James felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just a veiled threat. It was a warning. Camilla was suggesting that Kate's actions, and by extension his own, were part of a larger pattern of separation from the family. "I trust the princess's judgment." "Your Majesty? Of course you do," Camilla said. "Well, I won't keep you from your duties. But do think about what I've said. In this life, alliances matter. And sometimes we discover we've chosen the wrong ones." She moved past him into the VIP area, leaving James standing alone with her words echoing in his mind. That night, after the event ended, James found himself in a quiet corridor of the Royal Albert Hall, waiting while Kate finished a private conversation with the charity director. William appeared beside him, hands in his pockets, looking unusually serious. "Sergeant Whitmore," he said quietly, "can we speak frankly?" "Of course, Your Royal Highness." William glanced around, making sure they were alone. "I know Camilla spoke to you earlier. I saw it, and I can guess what she said." James remained silent, unsure how to respond. "She's trying to make you doubt yourself," William continued. "Trying to make you think you've put yourself in a dangerous position by being loyal to Catherine. She does this. It's her way of managing people, creating uncertainty, planting seeds of doubt. I don't doubt my choices, sir. Good, because here's what you need to understand. My wife and Camilla have a complicated relationship. They're cordial. They're respectful. But there's history there. Pain that goes back years before Catherine and I even married, and sometimes that history creates tension." William's expression was pained. "I love my father, and I've made peace with his choice to marry Camilla. But I also recognize that Catherine deserves to have people around her who put her needs first, not the institution's needs, not the appearance of family unity, her actual needs." He looked James in the eye. "That night at the hospital, you did exactly what my wife needed. You gave her space to be vulnerable without it turning into a palace drama. That's rare. And it's valuable. Don't let anyone make you regret it." "Thank you, sir." "That means a great deal." William nodded and walked away, leaving James alone with his thoughts. Over the following days, James noticed subtle shifts in how he was treated by other palace staff. Some were warmer, more respectful. Others were distant, almost cold. It was as if two camps were forming. Those who supported Kate's autonomy, and those who saw her actions as divisive. One afternoon, James received a message from his old mentor, Commander Ashford. She asked to meet him for coffee off palace grounds. That was unusual enough to make James nervous. They met at a quiet cafe in Kensington. Ashford looked tired, troubled. "James," she said after ordering, "I'm going to be blunt. You're in the middle of something bigger than you realize." "I'm aware there's tension, ma'am. Tension is one word for it. Fracture is another. The relationship between the king and queen, consort's household, and the prince and princess of Wales's household has been strained for months. Different priorities, different approaches to public duties, different visions for the future of the monarchy." She leaned forward. That hospital incident became a symbol. Kate drawing a boundary, Camilla pushing against it. You holding the line. It's not just about one night anymore. It's about power and control, and who gets to set boundaries in this family. James felt the weight of what she was saying. "I never intended to become part of palace politics. No one ever does. But here you are. And I need you to understand something. If this tension escalates, and there are signs it might, you'll be caught in the crossfire. Royal protection is supposed to be neutral, but you've been identified as being in Kate's camp. That makes you vulnerable. What should I do?" Ashford smiled sadly. "Keep doing your job. Protect the princess. Follow orders. But also watch your back. Document everything. Keep records of instructions you receive. And be prepared for the possibility that doing the right thing might not always protect you." As James left the cafe, he felt the full weight of his situation settling on his shoulders. He had stood at a door and refused entry to the Queen Consort. He had been promoted for his loyalty, and now he was being warned that his loyalty might ultimately cost him everything. The question was, how far would this conflict go? And when the dust settled, who would still be standing? The breaking point came 6 weeks after the hospital incident. It happened at Balmoral, During what was supposed to be a peaceful family gathering, James had accompanied Kate, William, and their children to Scotland for a long weekend. The atmosphere was tense from the start. The king had invited both families to stay at the estate, hoping to ease the growing distance between his household and his sons. It didn't work. On the second evening, a formal dinner was planned. Everyone attended. The king and Camilla, William and Kate, other extended family members. The dining room was elegant, the meal expertly prepared, but the conversation was strained. Full of polite nothings and careful silences, James stood outside the dining room with other security personnel, listening to the muffled voices inside. He could sense the tension even through the heavy oak doors. Then, raised voices. A chair scraping. The sharp sound of a glass being set down too hard. The door burst open. Kate emerged, her face pale but composed. William followed immediately after, his jaw set in anger. "Catherine, please," Camilla's voice called from inside. "We're family. We should be able to discuss this." Kate turned in the doorway. James could see her hands trembling slightly, though her voice remained steady. "Family respects boundaries, Camilla. Something you seem incapable of understanding." "I was concerned about your health," Camilla said, appearing in the doorway. "Is that so wrong? Is caring about you such a crime?" "Caring would have been respecting my wishes," Kate said quietly. "Instead, you tried to force your way into my hospital room. You questioned my security team. You've spent weeks making me feel guilty for needing space. That's not care. That's control." The king appeared behind Camilla, looking distressed. "Catherine, I'm sure we can discuss this calmly, can we?" Kate's voice was stronger now. "Because every time I try to establish a boundary, it's questioned. Every time I make a choice about my own life, my own health, my own privacy, I'm told I'm being difficult or divisive or ungrateful. That's not fair," Camilla said. "I've tried to be supportive, to be a friend to you," Kate said, and James heard years of frustration in that one word. "You've tried to manage me, to shape me into whatever version of a princess fits your vision of this family. And I'm done pretending that's the same as support." William stepped beside his wife, his voice cold and formal. "Father, we'll be leaving tomorrow morning. I think it's best if Catherine and I take some distance from family events for a while." The king looked stricken. "William, please. This is exactly what I was afraid of. The family fracturing." "The family fractured long before this," William said quietly. "We've just been pretending otherwise. But I will not ask my wife to continue performing unity when she's not being treated with basic respect." Camilla's face flushed. "This is absurd. One incident at a hospital, and suddenly I'm the villain? I'm being punished for caring?" "You're not being punished," Kate said tiredly. "You're being given boundaries, something everyone deserves. Even princesses." She turned and walked away, William beside her. James and the other protection officers immediately fell into formation around them as they walked through the corridors of Balmoral. James could hear Kate's breathing, quick and shallow. She was holding herself together through sheer will. They reached the private wing. Kate went directly to her room. William paused at the door, turning to James. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything. For standing firm, for giving Catherine the protection she needed even when it was difficult." James nodded. "It's my job, sir, and my honor." William's expression was complex, grateful and sad and determined all at once. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Palace officials will try to smooth this over. There will be pressure on Catherine to apologize, to back down. But we're not doing that anymore. We're drawing a line. I understand, sir. I hope you do. Because standing on our side of that line may cost you. It may cost all of us, but it's necessary. Over the next few days, the fallout was intense. The family left Balmoral separately. No joint photos. No coordinated statements. Just a quiet, profound separation. The press began speculating. Anonymous sources within the palace leaked conflicting stories. Some portrayed Kate as difficult and ungrateful. Others depicted Camilla as overbearing and controlling. The truth, as always, was more complicated than either narrative. James found himself at the center of attention he never wanted. Journalists discovered his role in the hospital incident. His name appeared in articles. Photos of him accompanying Kate to events were analyzed for meaning. Then, one morning, James was called to a meeting with Sir Clive Alderton and Commander Ashford. The atmosphere was grave. "Sergeant Whitmore," Sir Clive began, "your position has become untenable. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because you've become a symbol in a conflict that's bigger than any one person." James's heart sank. "I'm being removed." "Not exactly," Sir Clive said carefully. "We're offering you a choice. You can remain in royal protection, but be reassigned to diplomatic duties away from family events. Or you can accept a promotion to lead a new specialized security unit focused on privacy protection and boundary enforcement for all royal family members." It was brilliant, really. A way to resolve the conflict while saving face for everyone. James would be elevated, honored even, but he would also be moved away from Kate specifically. "There's a third option," Commander Ashford said. "You can remain exactly where you are as part of the Princess of Wales's personal detail. But if you choose that, you need to understand that you'll be part of the separation between the two households. There's no neutrality anymore." James thought about that night in the hospital corridor, about Kate's pale face in the hospital bed, thanking him for protecting her space, about William's words at Balmoral, about the choice between doing what was easy and doing what was right. "I choose to remain with the Princess of Wales," he said firmly. Sir Clive nodded slowly. "Then that's where you'll stay. But know this, Sergeant. The palace is watching. Both sides. Everything you do will be scrutinized. Every action interpreted as political. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes, sir." As James left the meeting, he pulled out his phone. A message from Kate's private secretary was waiting. "The princess wanted you to know that whatever you decide, she's grateful for your service. And that standing up for what's right always comes with a cost. But it's a cost worth paying." James looked out at the London skyline. He thought about duty and loyalty and the complicated nature of doing the right thing in a world where everything was political. He had stood at a door and refused entry to a queen. He had been promoted and threatened and caught in the middle of a royal family conflict. He had become, without meaning to, a symbol of something larger than himself. But he had also done something simple and profound. He had protected someone who needed protecting. He had respected someone's boundaries when others wouldn't. He had stood firm when it would have been easier to bend. And in the end, that was what being a royal guard really meant. Not standing outside palaces, not wearing a uniform, not following orders blindly, but protecting the humanity of the people behind the titles. Defending their right to be vulnerable, to be scared, to say no, even when the person they needed protection from wore a crown. James turned to duty that afternoon with his head held high. The conflict between the households would continue. The press would speculate. Palace officials would maneuver and strategize, but in one private hospital corridor on one difficult night, a guard had stood his ground, and a princess had been allowed to be simply human. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes that was everything.